The sound of the slap was so loud that for a moment nobody breathed. My cheek burned. I tasted blood. And as I stood there in the middle of my son's Thanksgiving dinner, staring at the woman who had just hit me, one thought kept repeating in my head. My son watched her do it. He hadn't stopped her. He hadn't even stood up. He had simply looked at me and whispered, "Dad, just apologize." But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Richard Hale, and before that Thanksgiving, I believed family was the one place where a man didn't have to prove his worth. I was wrong. That afternoon I walked up the gravel driveway of my son Daniel's enormous suburban home, wearing the best jacket I owned. It had belonged to my late wife. The cuffs were slightly frayed, but I had pressed it carefully that morning. I wanted to look respectable. Not rich, not impressive, just respectable. Because I knew Daniel's wife's family cared about appearances. What I didn't know was how much they hated anyone who didn't match theirs. Daniel opened the door. He was 32, successful, handsome, and exhausted. "Hey, Dad." He hugged me quickly. Then his eyes moved toward my jacket. For half a second, embarrassment crossed his face. I noticed. I pretended I didn't. Inside, everything looked expensive. White furniture, glass tables, paintings I couldn't understand. The kind of house where you were afraid to sit down without permission. Then a woman's voice floated from the living room. "So that's the famous father-in-law?" I turned. Margaret Whitmore, my daughter-in-law's mother, was sitting on the couch with a champagne glass in her hand. She looked me up and down, then smiled, not warmly, like she'd just discovered something unpleasant on the bottom of her shoe. I was beginning to wonder if you got lost coming from the trailer park. Daniel froze. I waited. Surely he'd defend me. He didn't. His wife Claire appeared behind him. "Mother." But there was no anger in her voice, only inconvenience. Margaret smiled. "Oh, relax, I'm joking." I swallowed. "Happy Thanksgiving, Margaret." She raised her glass. How charming. And somehow, before dinner had even started, I already knew. I hadn't been invited into a family. I'd been invited into a courtroom. And everyone except me already knew the verdict. Dinner looked like something from a magazine. A polished mahogany table, silverware arranged perfectly, crystal glasses, a centerpiece that probably cost more than my monthly pension. And then there was me, sitting at the far end, away from the people Margaret considered important. Claire took the head of the table. Daniel sat opposite her. Margaret sat near the center beside her son Travis, who had spent the first 10 minutes of dinner bragging about his new sports car. I was practically furniture. Then I saw my grandson, Ethan, 9 years old. He came running into the dining room wearing a suit and tie. The second he saw me, his face changed. "Grandpa." That one word warmed something inside me. I smiled. "Hey, buddy." He ran over and hugged me. Margaret frowned. "Ethan, sit properly." "But I want to sit with Grandpa." "Your grandfather can survive one dinner without you." Ethan ignored her. He pulled his chair beside mine. And for the first time that afternoon I felt like I belonged somewhere. Margaret wasn't finished. "So, Richard," she said, cutting into her turkey. "Daniel tells me you're retired." "I am." "What did you do?" "I was a construction foreman." She smiled. "Ah, so manual labor." I nodded. "Mostly that must have been difficult." "It was honest work." Travis laughed. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure." I kept eating. I had learned something during 35 years on construction sites. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to swing back. But Margaret kept testing me. She asked how much my house was worth, how much I made before retirement, whether I had ever traveled outside the country. Every question was disguised as curiosity. Every answer became another opportunity to make me feel small. Finally, she looked at my jacket. "That's an interesting coat." I touched the sleeve. "My wife's." "Oh." She paused. "Second-hand?" The table went quiet. I could hear Ethan's fork scrape against his plate. "Yes," I said. Margaret smiled. "I thought so." Daniel finally spoke. "Mom, can we just enjoy dinner?" Not defending me, just controlling the situation. That hurt more than Margaret's words. Then Margaret leaned toward me. "Tell me something, Richard. What's it like being poor?" My fork stopped. She continued before I could answer. "I imagine it's very freeing. No expectations, no pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle." I looked at my son. He stared down at his plate, so I answered her myself. It was difficult sometimes, but I raised Daniel, paid for his education, paid off my house, never asked my son for $1. Margaret blinked. You owned a house? Yes, she laughed softly. I assumed you lived in some little apartment. Ethan suddenly looked angry. Grandma, that's not nice. Margaret ignored him. Then Ethan tugged at his tie. Grandpa, I can't breathe. I stood. Come here. I loosened the knot. There, Ethan smiled. Thanks. I turned back toward my seat. Margaret looked at me. Then she smiled. Since you're already standing, she pointed toward the plates. Why don't you clear the table? I stared at her. Something inside me finally went still. No, the room froze. Margaret's smile disappeared. I'm sorry. I'm a guest here. Her face reddened. I think you need to remember whose house this is. I remember exactly. She stood. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. Then she walked toward me, and before I could understand what she intended, her hand came across my face. Crack. And the entire world went silent. My hand went to my cheek. My ears rang. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I wasn't looking at Margaret. I was looking at Daniel, my son, the little boy I had once carried home from school when he broke his ankle, the teenager I had worked double shifts to help send to college, the young man whose wedding suit I had helped pay for. I looked at him now. Daniel? His face was pale. He looked terrified, but not because I had been slapped, because something had gone wrong, something that could embarrass him. Say something, I whispered. He swallowed. Dad. She hit me. I know. Then tell her to apologize. Daniel looked at Margaret. Then Claire. Then me. And finally he whispered the words that broke something I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. Just apologize, Dad. I stared at him. What? Please, just apologize. We can finish dinner. My chest tightened. She slapped me. You provoked her. Those words hit harder than the slap. I felt something inside me collapse. Not anger. Something worse. Acceptance. I finally understood that the son I remembered was gone. Margaret crossed her arms. Well, I looked at her. Then at Daniel. Then at Claire. Nobody defended me. Nobody even looked ashamed. Except Ethan. My grandson was staring at me with tears filling his eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell Margaret exactly what I thought of her. But Ethan was watching. So I stayed quiet. Margaret pointed toward the door. If you don't apologize, I'll have security remove you. I took a breath. Then I heard a small voice. Mom. Everyone turned. Ethan was standing beside his chair. He was holding a phone. His hands were shaking. I recorded everything. Margaret's expression changed. What? Ethan lifted the phone. I was making a Thanksgiving video. Daniel stood. Ethan, give me the phone. No, Ethan, no. His voice cracked. Then he looked directly at his grandmother. Grandma, you're on the internet. Silence. Margaret's face went white. What did you do? Ethan's eyes filled with tears. I went live. Nobody moved. Then Claire whispered, how many people saw it? Ethan looked at the screen. More than 1,000. Margaret lunged toward him. Give me that phone. Ethan stepped backward. I moved between them. Don't touch him. For the first time that evening, Margaret looked afraid. The insults, the humiliation, the slap. Every second had been recorded. And now, the truth belonged to everyone. Ethan looked up at me. Grandpa. I knelt beside him. It's okay, buddy, he whispered. Why didn't anybody stop her? I looked around the table, and I realized I didn't have an answer. Because he was right. The adults had failed, but a 9-year-old hadn't. I took the phone from Ethan carefully. The video was still open. I could see the viewer count climbing. 1,103, 1,247, 1,391. Names appeared across the screen. Neighbors, friends, people from Claire's workplace, members of Margaret's charity organization, even people I had never met. Daniel rushed toward me. Dad, please. I looked at him. Please what? Delete it. Why? Because this could destroy us. I almost laughed. Us? His eyes filled with tears. Dad, I'm sorry. You weren't sorry when she hit me. I was scared. I know. He stared at me. Can we fix this? I looked down at the screen, then back at him. No. His face collapsed. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I handed the phone back to Ethan. Margaret finally found her voice. That video needs to come down immediately. I looked at her. You told me poor people belonged outside. She said nothing. So I'm going. I walked toward the door. Daniel grabbed my arm. Dad. I stopped. You can't leave like this. I slowly turned around. You already let me leave. His grip loosened. I continued. You let her slap me. His eyes filled with tears. You told me to apologize. I know. You chose comfort over your father. He whispered, I'm sorry. I shook my head. You're sorry because people saw it. That sentence destroyed him. I could see it. But I wasn't going to carry his guilt for him. I stepped outside. Cold air hit my face. My cheek still throbbed. But something had changed. For the first time that night, I wasn't ashamed of my old jacket. I wasn't ashamed of my small house. I wasn't ashamed of the work I had done. I was ashamed that I had spent years believing money determined a person's value. Margaret had money. Claire had status. Daniel had success. But Ethan had something none of them possessed that night. Courage. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. The video had spread. First, through social media. Then local news. Then larger outlets. People were furious. Not because I was wealthy. I wasn't. They were furious because everyone recognized the humiliation. A man had been insulted because he was poor, then physically attacked because he refused to accept it, and his own family had asked him to apologize. Margaret's carefully maintained reputation began collapsing. Charity boards asked her to resign. People demanded explanations. Claire's employers saw the video. Then she was called into a meeting. Daniel called me 37 times. I didn't answer. He left messages. Please, Dad, I'll make it right. Just tell people it was misunderstood. But I knew the truth. The video wasn't revenge. It was evidence. I hadn't planned any of this. I hadn't manipulated anyone. I hadn't lied. For once, I didn't have to fight. The truth was doing the fighting for me. Within days, Margaret's world began to unravel. The same people who once laughed at her jokes stopped returning her calls. The same charity events where she had once been welcomed with champagne suddenly had no place for her. Her photograph disappeared from event pages. Her name disappeared from donor lists. She tried to claim the video had been edited. It hadn't. She said I had provoked her. The video showed otherwise. She said I had insulted her. The video showed otherwise. She said she had merely lost her temper. The video showed exactly what losing that temper had cost her. Claire wasn't doing much better. Her boss had watched the footage. According to Daniel, the meeting lasted less than 20 minutes. Claire lost her job shortly afterward. Daniel begged me to release a statement saying the entire thing had been exaggerated. I refused. Then he came to my house. I opened the door and found him standing there with red eyes. Dad. I didn't invite him inside. He looked at my jacket. The same jacket I had worn that Thanksgiving. I've been calling. I know. Please let me explain. I said nothing. He looked down. I was afraid. I know. I didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what to do. He looked up. What? Stand up. His eyes filled with tears. You should have stood up. He whispered, I failed you. Yes, that single word seemed to hit him harder than anything else I could have said. He stepped closer. Can you forgive me? I took a long breath. Maybe someday. His face brightened. But not today. The smile disappeared. I need you to understand something, Daniel. He waited. Forgiveness isn't something you demand because the consequences became uncomfortable. He nodded slowly. You watched me get humiliated. I know. You watched me get hit. I know. And then you asked me to apologize. His lips trembled. I hate myself for that. Then change. He looked confused. How? Stop trying to protect the people who hurt you, just because they have money, status, or influence. He lowered his head. For the first time I saw my son not as the successful man from the expensive house, but as the frightened boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street. I wanted to hug him. But wanting to forgive someone and being ready to forgive them are two different things. So I stepped backward. Go home, Daniel, he nodded, and walked away. Months passed. I didn't speak to Daniel. I didn't speak to Claire. And I certainly didn't speak to Margaret. But I thought about Ethan every day. I wondered whether he blamed himself. I wondered whether his parents punished him. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope was covered in crooked handwriting. My hand started shaking before I even opened it. Inside was a crayon drawing. Two people sitting on a park bench. Me and Ethan. We were eating ice cream. Above us, he'd drawn a bright yellow sun. Underneath, he'd written, "Me and Grandpa. Best team." I had to stop reading. My eyes filled with tears. Then I saw the rest. "Dear Grandpa, I'm sorry about Thanksgiving. You don't have to be sorry." I smiled through the tears. Then I read the sentence that broke my heart. I got grounded for using my phone, but I would do it again, because Grandma shouldn't have hit you. I sat there for a long time. That little boy had understood something grown adults couldn't. Right was right. Wrong was wrong. No amount of money changed that. No expensive house changed it. No family reputation changed it. And no fear could justify standing silent. I wrote Ethan back. I told him he had done the right thing. But I also told him something important. Never think you have to become cruel to protect someone you love. Tell the truth. Stand up when something is wrong. And always remember that courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what's right while you're afraid. Weeks later, Daniel sent another message. This time, he didn't ask me to forgive him. He simply said, "I'm going to therapy." Then, "I'm learning why I keep choosing approval over courage." Then, "I don't expect you to answer." That message stayed with me. Maybe there was hope. Not for the old relationship. That one was gone. But perhaps for something new. Something honest. The internet eventually moved on. That is what the internet does. Another scandal appeared. Another story replaced ours. But I never forgot Thanksgiving. Not because Margaret slapped me. The physical pain faded within days. What stayed was the silence. The silence of every adult sitting around that table, and the voice of one child who refused to accept it. Ethan didn't save me with money. He didn't fight Margaret. He didn't make a speech. He simply told the truth. And sometimes, truth is the most powerful revenge a person can have. A year after Thanksgiving, I returned to the park. I sat on a bench beneath the same kind of autumn trees that had surrounded my childhood home. Then I heard footsteps. Grandpa. I turned. Ethan came running toward me. Behind him stood Daniel. He stopped several feet away. He didn't rush forward. He didn't demand forgiveness. He simply waited. I looked at him. He nodded. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Daniel." Ethan jumped onto the bench beside me. "I brought something." He pulled an old photograph from his pocket. It was a picture of me and Daniel when he was a little boy. I stared at it. "Where'd you get this?" "Dad gave it to me." I looked at Daniel. He smiled faintly. "I thought you should have it." For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Daniel said, "I can't undo Thanksgiving. No, I can't erase what I did. No, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure I never become that person again." I looked into my son's eyes, and this time I didn't see fear. I saw shame, but beneath it, I saw responsibility. That mattered. I stood. Daniel looked nervous. I held out my hand. He stared at it, then took it. We didn't hug, not yet. Some wounds need time. But Ethan smiled between us, and somehow, that was enough. Later that evening, I walked home wearing the same jacket Margaret had mocked. The cuffs were still frayed. The fabric was still old. But I no longer saw something embarrassing. I saw 35 years of work. I saw my wife's memory. I saw the man who had raised a son. The man who had built foundations strong enough to hold buildings taller than anything Margaret could ever own. And I realized something. Revenge doesn't always mean destroying the person who hurt you. Sometimes revenge is refusing to let them decide your worth. Sometimes it's walking away with your dignity intact. Sometimes it's letting the truth speak when you no longer have the strength. And sometimes, the most satisfying justice comes from the smallest voice in the room. Ethan taught me that. A 9-year-old boy had looked at a room full of frightened adults and asked the only question that mattered. Isn't it wrong to hurt people? Yes, it was wrong. It had always been wrong. And no amount of wealth could change that. That Thanksgiving, Margaret wanted me to feel small. Instead, she exposed herself. She wanted me to leave ashamed. Instead, I walked out knowing exactly who I was. She thought she was protecting her family's reputation. Instead, the truth destroyed the illusion she had spent years building. And my son thought apologizing would keep his family together. Instead, It taught him how quickly a family can fall apart when someone chooses comfort over courage. I never got an apology that could erase that night. I didn't need one, because I had something better. The truth, my dignity, and a grandson who had the courage to speak when everyone else remained silent. If you've ever been treated like you weren't good enough because of your money, your job, your clothes, or your background, remember this: your value was never determined by the people who looked down on you. And if this story gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe to Ruthless Karma, and tell us in the comments, would you have forgiven Daniel after what he did, or would you have walked away forever? Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't making your enemy suffer. It's walking away and realizing they were never worthy of having the power to define you.